And now, Michigan Reimagined with Chris Buck.
So cybercrime has wreaked havoc on businesses large and small, and yet many still believe it's not going to happen to them. So here to discuss how outsourced IT firms are helping protect businesses large and small from the hackers and ransomware criminals is the CEO and founder of Doberman Technologies, Mr. Ian Richardson. Welcome, Ian.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Doberman Technologies as a company. So who are you and what kinds of services do you provide for your clients?
So Doberman is a business IT services provider, and we use strategic processes and technology to enable our clients to achieve their goals. That's what we do. So from cybersecurity, backup, service and support, hardware, software, whatever.
Okay.
We put in process and procedure into our clients to help them reach whatever their goal is, whether that's exit or growth or acquisition or maintenance. That's what we're there for.
Okay. Do you have a certain type of standard client? Is there anyone that tends to make up a bulk of your client base?
Yeah, the majority of our clients are mature, growth-oriented organizations that have specific revenue goals they're looking to achieve.
Got it. Okay. And we're here based in mid-Michigan. Where is Doberman located?
We're over in Mason, Michigan, and we serve the Lower Peninsula, but we're primarily focused in that mid-Michigan Lansing market.
Got it. Okay. And does that radiate out much? I mean, can you handle a client that isn't close, or do you prefer to have people that you can get to?
Yeah, the rule of thumb in IT is always be able to be in the building quickly in case everything goes wrong and one more thing breaks.
Right.
So
okay.
we try to aim for folks that are headquartered within 75 miles of Mason.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. So cybersecurity is a big deal, and we'll probably talk quite a bit in this podcast about cybersecurity specifically, but we can talk about other things as well. In normal circumstances, leave the pandemic kind of aside, what is your general advice or when it comes to cybersecurity under normal circumstances?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different aspects. The biggest piece is to come up with a strategy that has layers.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you layer an approach. You don't rely on one single item. There's no silver bullet. There's no 100% certain method for cybersecurity. There's a few easy things, like you can implement a passphrase instead of a password. That's the concept of using a sentence instead of gobbledygook. It's easy for you to remember, and
right,
it's impossible for a computer to break. So you can do things like that. You can stop reusing passwords, get people trained and aligned on your policy and procedure. These are all things that anyone can do. You don't need an IT professional to implement them in your organization.
Right.
But you need to combine those with modern techniques and technologies to really seal the gaps in a company strategy.
Yeah, and I guess a metaphor that I'd use for cybersecurity is almost like the whole radar detector concept, where the radar detector is invented to kind of advise you that there's a police radar coming up, and then the police radar gets more modernized to thwart the radar detectors, but then the radar detector gets better. Is that same kind of push-pull where trying to prevent hackers, but the hackers get smarter, and so you have to get smarter, and it just kind of keeps up in the game?
Absolutely, it's never static. We always use the concept of setting a new mile marker, setting a new flag, right? So you're walking out into undiscovered territory, you plant a flag, well, someone went by you and planted a new flag, and so you've got to catch up. There's never a point in cybersecurity where things are static.
Right.
If you really want a good example, pull your cell phone out of your pocket and think about what it looked like 10 years ago and what it looked like 10 years before that. You probably went from pager to flip phone to smartphone, BlackBerry to now an iPhone or an Android.
Yep.
And those sorts of quantum leaps in technology, it's even more dramatic in cyber.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, we'll talk about the pandemic's effect on cybersecurity. So kind of before the pandemic happened, how frequently would cyber hacks or that event kind of thing happen?
So the pandemic has thrown it into a more stark relief where people are paying a little bit more attention. But this has been an ongoing problem since the turn of the millennium.
Okay.
And even more so since 2010 onward. There's an old statistic from Verizon which got built out in 2012, which has held true all the way to today, that 60% of small businesses will go out of business within 6 months of a successful cyber incident, so a data breach.
Okay.
And that statistic has held true since it was released by Verizon in 2012, which means they started collecting data in 2009. So it really is the single biggest technological threat in today's environment. It's just people are finally starting to pay attention a little bit more because there's been story after story after story of major impact items. And locally, you're starting to hear people talk about it. There's not so much shame in admitting, hey, my business was impacted by this breach or my business had this incident occur. And only through that collaborative sharing of people admitting, hey, there was a problem, can we start to get better.
Right. So it still does kind of feel like you see it in the headlines, right? Home Depot or Target or banks, and I mean some scary stuff. And you sit there as a consumer or just a person on the planet and just say, "Oh my gosh, this big company got whacked." But you hear more and more to your point you just stated that it happens all over the place and in much smaller businesses. And there is some of that shame effect, or I don't want to let people know that my brand got hacked. But the volume, I guess, really what I want to get at is that this is happening all the time, like a daily occurrence.
Oh, yeah. It's a constant occurrence. So some of the local municipalities we've talked to deal with 25,000 attacks per hour. Per hour. So you can do the math that it's a 24-hour day and that people are launching attacks specifically outside of operating hours to really think about the magnitude. But 60% of successful attacks hit organizations with 100 employees or less.
Okay.
So not only are small businesses a target, you're more likely to fall victim because you're more likely to have less sophisticated methodologies, less defined process, and a ill-defined strategy to protect yourself. You don't have a 7-figure cybersecurity budget like Verizon or a bank.
Right.
So it's easier to get into your building than it is somewhere else, and the criminals are casting webs. They're knocking on everyone's front door to see which one is unlocked and which one isn't being paid attention to.
Right.
And if you happen to leave your front door unlocked, they're going to walk on through, same as your neighbor, same as the house down the road.
And so if you're getting pounded with all these attempts, clearly most of them get knocked out with firewalls and whatever systems are in place. But statistics would tell you that we're going to try 25,000 things an hour. Something's going to penetrate. We're going to find the weakness and something's going to get through, and then we're off to the races. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. The adage in the industry is it's not if, it's when.
Right.
Another descriptor is there are two types of organizations, those that know they've been hacked and those that don't.
Right.
But that everyone's already been breached. If you think about nation states and some of the talent across the pond and even in this country that are really going against this, the amount of individuals on the wrong side of the cybersecurity fence is staggering. There is a statistic from Michael George, who is the previous CEO of Continuum, that happened out in 2018, and they did a pretty robust study. Cybercrime has more revenue for organized crime than all other forms combined. Extortion, trafficking, drugs, weapons, you name it, you put all of those in a bucket, it doesn't give them as much revenue as cybercrime does. So this is not kids in parents' basements anymore. These guys are Capone. They know what they're doing, and there's a huge amount of money in it. And they don't have to win all the time. It's a numbers game. This is a Walmart volume model. They're going after 5,000 organizations per push, and they only need 10 of them to fail and one of them to pay to make their ROI.
So crime does pay.
Crime does pay, unfortunately.
So I got to ask you, when COVID hit and everyone was sending their employees home, and now all of a sudden, you've got people out of the workplace, right? And so now I've got to rely on, Freddie's home computer. And while I might get, they've got passwords and those kinds of things, but it's their Wi-Fi and it's their modem and router and all the stuff that I don't really even understand all that thoroughly. But I was told by another person that that was going to be high times for these types of cybercrime attempts, because everyone in a big office building that has the budget to do all those things are now all of a sudden you're scattered around and you've got whatever strength of defense that people have in their private residence. Is that true? And have you experienced that to be the case?
It's absolutely true. And yes. So if you think about it, when you were in the office, you had the office's network. They had that office firewall, and it was an office computer, even if it was a laptop, with the office software and the office security policies. So all of that built up those layers.
Right.
Even if you took your office computer home, your kid's computer, your kid's PS5 or Xbox or whatever, everyone's mobile phones is behind the home grade router. So I don't need to break into your office computer. I need to break into your kid's iPhone and then jump from there to your kid's computer. Or I need to convince you on your home laptop to open an email on your home email, your personal email. If I can infect that one computer, it's all one network. I can jump over to the office computer, which then lets me jump over to the office, which now I'm off to the races. And a lot of the times, the attackers have gotten a lot more sophisticated. Back in the day, it used to be, hey, I got into a network and I launched an attack immediately. The average duration from when someone gets into the network to when they launch an attack is 180 days now. They're in your network for half a year before they bother to push the button because they're doing research and figuring out how to hit you hardest and how it's going to hurt the most before they launch the attack.
It's fascinating you bring that up because someone mentioned that to me and I'd never heard that. So just to say that again, people will actually hack you, but not let you know you've been hacked or deploy any damaging or requests for money or any of that stuff until they want to. So right now, there's a lot of municipalities, small businesses, large businesses that have been hacked that are just the hackers are just waiting to launch.
The clock is ticking, so to speak.
Right.
And so I don't like fear mongering. There are techniques and software and procedures you can use to find people who are in your network. The industry term is called enumeration, which all that means is looking around,
right,
and seeing what they can do. But yeah. Every hacker, every person who's listening to this probably has an idea of what firewall is, what antivirus is, and what backup does. And so do the hackers. And so when a successful attack goes, it's because they got in, they got past your firewall, they turned off your antivirus, and they deleted the backup, then they launched the attack. That's what a hacker will do to you these days. So thinking that your backup is enough or your antivirus is enough is a false sense of security, which is almost worse than not having anything at all. Because you think you're protected, you think you're safe, and so you're sleeping well at night, when really all it is, oh, well, this is, I put this infection in, and I've put this little logic bomb in your network, and I'm waiting 6 months until your oldest backup ticks over, and that's the long, because I looked at your backups and I saw how they were working, and so now you've been backing up my attack for 6 months, and 6 months in a day, when your oldest backup expires, then I launch. So there's no way you can restore back because you restore back and my attack immediately launches again.
Right.
And it happens over and over again. We've been called in for incident response for folks that didn't have a plan, didn't have a strategy. And it really is painful to walk in and say, there's absolutely nothing to be done. Your data's gone. You can try to pay the ransom. More often than not, you don't get the data back. More often than not, you don't recover. And it's gone. And that's heartbreaking.
No kidding. So how do you get good at this? I mean, how does Doberman, stay relevant, stay ahead of this, and become a great service provider for your clients?
So it's constant education. IT is a very collaborative field. I have peers all over the country and all over the globe that I talk with and interact with. Hey, what are you doing around this? How are you managing this threat, etc.? There's a large amount of collaboration in the industry, especially over the past 3 to 4 years. Even competing software vendors and competing IT companies are recognizing that this is a rising tide type situation. We all need to stand together or we will certainly all hang separately.
Right.
So everyone shares information. There's a large amount of threat intelligence shared in the industry by software vendors that see this type of information. So we are continually educating ourselves. Our team continually goes after new certifications, new qualifications. We're always evaluating new vendors and new products, and we're having consistent, reliable conversations. There's not a client that I have that I don't have a conversation with every quarter around security. This is what's happening. This is what we're doing next. This is what we just did. This is what we're doing now. And this is what you need to expect next quarter, next year, etc. So unfortunately, if you're listening, you run a small business and it feels like, hey, every time I talk with my IT guy, they're asking for a little bit more budget about cybersecurity, that's honestly the sign of a good IT guy.
Right. So how much of your time or services you provide for the clients surround cybersecurity versus other work?
So I would say over 40% of an engagement with Doberman is focused primarily on cyber these days. Another 40% is disaster recovery, and 20% is just making sure the lights are on when you need the lights to be on. It's pretty easy to keep you up these days with the cloud.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Doberman.net's the website. Ian@Doberman.net reaches me directly. Or if you go there, there's a little button you can click on to book time with me at your convenience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me, CEO and founder of Doberman Technologies, Mr. Ian Richardson. Thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.